Yeah, I'd
Or
like to
should we
answer
win?
the question
I'm
too.
shooting
That
again.
was-
Yeah.
Okay. So whatever we were talking about, it was actually really interesting because I love, it's very emotional that your community's lost, but it's so interesting the notion that you're now out in the community
and sharing it with the
and
larger
sharing it with the
world.
larger
She
world,
was sharing-
and even larger world if you make a film or a reality show or
Yeah.
whatever about it. And you're right, everybody's connected. Everybody's connected in some way. Maybe we just don't quite realize it. I just love
Yeah.
that.
And it's
idea.
interesting too when I first heard about this project and about Paulie wanting to do this and feeling like he wanted to make this reality show about it, and that he'd done these other shows of helping people rebuild their own homes, that didn't have the resources. And I just loved that he was doing that. But I just thought, like, knowing Harbin in this community the way I experienced it, I had this feeling of like, oh, no way, they're never going to go for it. Like, no way. This is just because there was this sense for me in that community, like it was kind of us and them, like we're in our own little safe cocoon of heart consciousness and love, but the real world was this whole other thing that was a little harder to be with, and there were only those that were drawn to Harbin and to be a part of that community that came and were a part of it, and those were the special people that were drawn to it. But like as far as making it a reality show and part of this larger real world, like I just sensed, and it's funny, not only in myself, I sensed sort of like that hesitancy, but I sensed like the managing directors and those in charge of making these kind of decisions as Harbin would never go for it. But I realized part of that, upon reflection, was there's history there of having kind of to protect something. I mean, there's many levels of the history. I mean, some of the history I think is really like maybe some laws were being broken or they weren't doing it totally like legit at the beginning, and so the people, they wanted to be careful about that because they didn't want repercussions. For example, the whole thing with making Harbin ADA compliant, so it was easy for people with disabilities to use it. They were a little behind on doing that and trying to catch up right when the fire came down. So now, when it gets rebuilt, it's all going to become ADA compliant and be accessible to everybody, which is a wonderful thing, really. But that's just one example of the secrecy. And another, but what I realized upon reflecting upon this, it's sort of as if like something valuable and judged against in a way by the world. I mean, I use an example of just like, being on the fringe of society, like being gay at a time, for example, when that wasn't so acceptable. And like you had to hide more that or smoking pot when a time when it wasn't so accessible, you kind of had to hide that a little more, and so it became this kind of secret society or like this cult of thatness that hadn't yet been integrated into the larger world. And I felt like Harbin as this community and this alternative community and the heart consciousness, it felt a little bit like the world couldn't fully accept this tender, vulnerable, heart-caring love, so we had to protect it in ourselves. And now that the fire's come down and like blown this all open in a way, I also feel like it's perfect timing because the world, I feel like, is more ready than ever before to really embrace and accept our need for loving and caring and meeting each other, recognizing the oneness of all creation.
And do you also feel like your community is ready to accept that the world's ready to accept it? Because I think it's two ways.
Yeah, I think they're varying degrees. And I mean, this is, if you look at the history of these kind of things, not everyone's ready to accept it at once. It happens in stages over time, and it takes time to integrate all that change. But it's like an opportunity in a way. And part of what excites me about what Paulie wants to do is like, it is this incredible opportunity. And some people aren't going to want to do it. Some people, it's going to bring up stuff for them. They're going to resist it. They're going to go back to where they feel safe. Some people are going to think it's just exploitive and like it's not being done right. So I strongly encourage that it be done really, really well in a way that, like Arpita was saying, supports the larger world's evolution into greater heart consciousness, greater love for ourselves and the planet and the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think of it so much as secrecy as privacy, really. That there are things that only unfold in a private situation. Like it's one thing to make love in your bedroom and it's another thing to make love on stage, right? And so, like, people
They're both kind of neat, actually.
It's a clothing optional community, and people need to feel safe in order to be naked. And so, like, the whole idea of film crews is so completely opposite to how
That's true.
there's always been a ban on
You couldn't even bring
cameras
cameras there.
at Harbin. There's no cameras allowed, right?
To
Because if
protect
there's
people's
cameras, people
privacy.
are not going to feel comfortable being naked. Like,
Yeah.
especially in the modern world with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and whatever, like, what's going to happen with these pictures? So if there's cameras around, people are not comfortable being naked. And I think there's a lot of things that people are not comfortable with if there are cameras around. And so that's a big concern to me about how would this work? Like, can you have some sense of privacy and intimacy, which is completely intrinsic to what happens at Harbin, the healing process and people's openness and connection happens in a situation that feels intimate, and cameras basically ruin the sense of intimacy and presence. Also, the idea of being present with one another is a big thing that builds community. And if you know, like we're talking to a camera right now, we're not as present as we would be if we were talking without the camera. So that's my concern of how would this work anyway, is how do you have a camera and still have presence and intimacy?
I think that's the challenge.
Yeah. And it's a wonderful opportunity, too, in the challenge. Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of the exposure, like you were saying before, exposure to the larger world, especially to help spread this wonderful seed vision of what Harbin was, of the founder, whose name is Ishvara. He's written this book. What's the book called?
Oneness in Living.
Oneness in Living. And there's this line from the book. It says living the future. But the idea, my sense of interpreting that is like, how can we now create the world that will be the future that we know was going to be better for us and everybody else? Like, what do we do now to live that? And I feel like this project could be this amazing opportunity to like share that more, to get people interested in that more on a larger scale, to get people with resources to come in and like say, yeah, I'm ready to be a part of creating this larger thing. Part of the vision that Ishvara has and that they were at the brink of trying to get started was creating a whole like New Age university, a whole campus where people could come and study the healing arts, study how to live in greater harmony with the earth, study like all sorts of things that, you know. And I was at the brink of applying to be a minister at Harbin. I had sent in my application, and one of the things that I wrote in my application was this feeling of how Harbin has this potential to like be this seed project for the larger world about how larger community can live in greater wholeness and harmony. Like our community is filled with people going to yoga classes, people doing therapy on themselves, people doing diets to help improve themselves, but a huge part of it is very individual. Like, and I feel like the real next step for us is like learning as a group the power we have to apply those same kind of principles, to work together to make these larger shifts and these larger changes, like that we could come together as a community and make magic happen. Like that story someone just told us recently about this polluted lake in, where was it?
Japan.
In Japan, that had been polluted because it had been just not treated well. And the members of this village finally said, we got to do something about this. And they came together and they held hands in a circle around this polluted lake, and they prayed to the lake. And they just said, like, we love you, lake, we're sorry, we're here, we want you to be a healthy, vibrant lake now. And they did this intentionally, and in a very short time, the lake apparently, like, cleaned itself and became vibrant, healthy drinking water again because of the power of this group, people focusing together in this good way. And I feel like there's this potential here for that in this project, like that it can draw people together like that, and just amazing, wonderful, magical things can come out of that shared co-creation.